one former boss of mine just told me not long ago is like, hey, you're in the attitude management business, and that can take a toll on particularly the sales leaders, more than even a list of tasks might, because it is demanding um, to be both sort of empathetic, but also holding them accountable at the same time.
Our guest today is Aldo Siciliano, COO and President of Waters International Realty. Aldo brings an amazing combination of data-driven strategy and people-first leadership to this role, helping the company scale while maintaining a strong culture of accountability and service. On today's episode, we dive into why Aldo and his team use EOS to drive clarity and alignment, how they maintain accountability without sacrificing empathy, and the art of attitude management in high-performing teams. We also explore how to know when to adopt new tools versus keeping systems simple. And Aldo shares his insights on hiring the right people to build a culture that lasts. If you're a COO looking to strengthen your team, streamline operations, and lead with both results and heart, this conversation is packed with actionable takeaways you won't want to miss. We are live with Aldo. Welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and start off. Give us a little bit of an insight into Waters International Realty. What do you do and who do you serve?
So we're a multi-market real estate brokerage focused on the residential side, and focused also on the state of Texas. So we've got offices currently in Austin, San Antonio, Dallas, Fort Worth. The latest one is Killeen, Temple, Waco. And um, my role is obviously the CEO of Waters, and we generally serve all kinds of clients in all of these markets who are looking to sell their homes, and of course also purchase homes. And yeah, I mean, that's roughly it.
Awesome. And where are you located?
I'm based out of Austin.
Oh, you are? Okay. So we're both Austinites.
Yes,
Yes. Okay.
I'm a recent transplant, but yes.
Where did you move from?
Previously I lived in Houston, but spent most of my life in Montreal.
Oh, nice. Okay. I haven't been to Montreal, but I hear it's great. Houston, on the other hand, I've been to a couple times, and I will screamingly say that Austin takes the cake for me, at least.
I do prefer Austin. Out of the cities in Texas that I've had a chance to visit, it's the one I prefer. So I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, it's really good. Well, in terms of your role, I would love to hear just a little bit of your journey. You've been with the company for almost 4 years. Tell us a little bit about how you found yourself in the position you're in now.
Sure. So I actually initially came in as the VP of marketing. I was looking partly to move to Austin at the time, and was wrapping up my MBA, and saw the opportunity here, met with Chris, and sort of headed off from there. And I spent about a year and a half in that role, and slowly transitioned to taking on my current responsibilities, uh, which was to sort of integrate everything at the time. And excuse me. That's been the journey for the last 3.5 years, more or less. It's just I started with marketing, which was a very big core function for the company. Sort of started taking on additional responsibilities as we were implementing the EOS system, and that was sort of a natural uh, lead into taking this role, which was integrating the entire company, getting everybody accountable, setting up the measurements, and making sure that all the components of vision and strategy translated into execution. So that's been the high level summary of the last 2.5 years. Sorry, 3.5 years.
In terms of the progression for you in taking on other responsibilities, what additional responsibilities did you take on outside of marketing? Because, like we were saying kind of before we started the episode, Cameron talks about this book in his second in command book, is that there's a million different variations of
Yes.
COO, versus like a CFO might be able to transfer company to company a little bit easier than a COO because it's so specific to the CEO and the needs of the company.
Hmm.
What were the responsibilities that you took on, and what does your day-to-day look like now?
Um, so man, if we think about the transition going from VP of marketing, which was really focus on marketing planning, marketing budgeting, measurement of performance, thinking of the marketing mix. And it's really just, hey, I'm going to feed the machine that provides customers to the entire company. And then slowly started to, slowly. It took maybe 2 to 3 months where I took on the responsibility of one, uh, understanding what the each department did, and then what it needed to accomplish, and assign the metrics to maintain profitability, and then cohesion and maintaining, say, the right heading and direction, and what we did. And the element that was there is also that in this role, and I think it's more apparent. It's not the first time that I've taken a more general management role. I've did it previously with a company that I worked in Houston. So I've always had sort of that tendency to want to be a very, very good generalist without being a super expert in any one thing. And what was really apparent was the ability to adapt to the CEO was probably the key factor. And I think it's very, very important for that dynamic of CEO, COO to function really well, for the talents, skills, and personalities to be complementary and not identical, simply because uh, one has to know when to hit the gas and follow in the, hey, let's charge ahead and follow the vision and grow, but also then know when to sort of hit the brakes or throttle uh, when there are additional ramifications across the organization.
What was it about? Is Chris the CEO?
Yes.
Okay. What was it about Chris that stood out to you as someone that you would want to work kind of hand in hand with?
Oh, I have to say that he is probably the best 0 to 1 entrepreneur that I've worked with, throughout my career. I've worked for great, great leaders and CEOs, but in terms of that ability to go from idea to, from nothing to something, I find that he's, extremely talented. It's I don't know, it's this energy that that he has where he has an idea and he's like, "Hey, this is possible." And, and it's not my personal inclination. I will tend to want to get a little more data. And so that was really what uh made me want to spend more time with this company.
What is your guys' dynamic in terms of him being the visionary, driving things forward, exactly what you just shared? What is that dynamic like between you guys in terms of him sharing where he wants to go and you actually executing, figuring out what to focus on, how to do it? What does that process look like?
Um in generally speaking, it's he'll come up with an idea, and he'll sort of shoot it off to me and say, "Hey, what about doing this?" And I will naturally kind of start to, in my head, break it down as to, what does it feasibly look like. Uh, uh, think, hey, what would have to be true for this to happen, and then try to work the problem backward, and then shoot back some ideas. And usually that's how we kind of get on the same page, and decide whether or not to move ahead with any kind of new thing or change that has to be implemented in the company.
Awesome. And when he decided to transition you into the COO position, obviously that's a big decision for him too. This is going to be his right hand person. What was it about you, the way that you were showing up, your philosophy, or what you were doing that made that a clear decision for him?
That's a good question. I think it's all of the above, and what I mean by that is I always liked to ensure that all the parts are working well together as much as it's possible. And I always have that curiosity of, hey, how can we make this system more cohesive, and how can we improve, and both in terms of you can get, what are the opportunities to grow significantly, the revenue or the top line, and balance that out with what are the incremental improvements you can make, right? And those are more around kind of discipline. They're more about systems, and they might seem more boring to some people, but that I personally believe that it's both of those things have to be true. And so I think what he saw was that I was um, naturally inclined to want to integrate everything together, uh, while still supporting the vision, in generally speaking.
Mhm. You said that you guys implemented EOS.
Hmm.
What was the reason why you guys decided to do that?
You know, I've used a few of the business operating systems in the past. I think EOS is the best suited for the company uh, that we work in, simply because it's probably the simplest to operate. It doesn't have a lot of maintenance, and it's the easiest to implement across a smaller business like this one. Whereas, if you think about scaling up, I think scaling up is an incredible system, but it requires a lot more input from the leadership team. And so the reason we chose this, is that it's the nature of the business, and also the bandwidth of the team is probably what allowed it.
For anyone who's listening who's not familiar with EOS, can you give us a little breakdown of what is that and what are maybe the one or two key things that have been helpful for you that you've implemented from it?
Yeah, sure. So it's EOS is short for Entrepreneurial Operating System, and it was created, I want to say, in the late '90s to 2000s. Um, and there are a couple of fundamental ideas that drive it, and it's one that it creates a cadence of tracking, meeting, and problem solving for the leadership team inside of a company. But it also has a big emphasis on the relationship between what's called the visionary in the company and the integrator. And so I think the genesis of EOS comes from the idea that a lot of CEOs were struggling because a lot of them tend to be good at creating business, developing business, generating revenue, and coming up with the big ideas, but they struggled with putting that all together into something that's a well-oiled machine.
So what are those kind of the machine parts? What are a couple of those that you guys use?
So we I don't want to say I'm not a big fan of dogma when it comes to business, but we actually follow EOS as prescribed pretty closely. So we have the level 10 meetings, which are the weekly meetings where everybody looks at the metrics that the leaders around the table are accountable for. We follow the quarterly cadence for updating what's called the rocks, and so everybody has obviously their metrics and targets for the given quarter, but they also have other projects that are meant to help the advancement of the existing targets, but also uh, potentially expanding uh, or improving those metrics in terms of revenue or in terms of profitability for the company.
Great. In terms of the systems that you're implementing outside of EOS, can you share an approach or maybe an example of a time where something felt really chaotic, things were breaking down, maybe you guys were scaling and you needed to put a system in place and what you did?
Sure. What do you think about that one? Um, I was I was done with they asked me these
Example,
questions.
I know I try to avoid like example questions. Keep it less.
It's only because I do so many I do so many that once they're done, I just sort of wipe them from my memory. But um, I'm trying to think of I can think of a lot of measurements that were not being taken. So one example would be the performance internally. What's important is that because it's a marketing and sales organization, that the journey of the leads and thereafter clients, uh, have different transition or conversion points, and there is a lot of complexity. From the outside, the real estate brokerage might not seem that complex simply because of its nature, where it just tends to be generally a solo agent operating by themselves. But when you scale it into an organization, there are a lot of nuances and different uh, elements that will get lost in the scaling. And so it's, how do you systemize certain things? And if, for example, you notice that the conversion from someone booking an appointment to the appointment actually happening, well, there's more than one explanation. And so setting up the systems to measure uh, all of those possible outcomes as simply as possible becomes one of these incremental improvements that I mentioned earlier, that helps the company know, are we being efficient? Is our money being allocated properly in marketing? Are our systems allowing us to perform the best? And it's that kind of thought process that really drives um, the machine forward over time.
Hmm. With systems that you're kind of adding in, and I know from in my experience, there's like the incremental changes where it's kind of like we'll do this little thing here, and then you've got monumental changes, which might be like we're changing, an ATS system, and so you got like a big cost of change, but it might affect positively 100 times more than doing these like little incremental changes. I find that with the big changes, it's like almost a little bit easier to make playbooks for because you're just like everything's fresh versus incremental changes over time. SOPs and playbooks can kind of get outdated and people aren't watching them. Do you guys have any playbooks or SOP systems for keeping those things up to date?
We do. So it's nothing fancy. We have department specific SOP folders where each leader is accountable for updating. And right now, as we're speaking, we have someone who's helping us internally who's building a knowledge base to sort of help parse that information and make it more accessible to everyone. And that usually is where, you know, all those things get updated. To your point, the smaller changes, what is sometimes a little challenging is that no department is an island, and so anything that you change on the one end has to take into consideration the impact on people who are upstream or downstream, and how their work might be affected, and so it makes it seem as if the effort for such a small change is disproportionately bigger, but at the same time, even just thinking of the last 3.5 years, the large changes are probably the ones that overall hit more resistance, um, even if they're easier to plan for.
Hmm.
Yeah.
When you are giving out projects like this team member that's building the knowledge base, what does your approach look like when it comes to delegating something and keeping tabs, keeping accountability with people on your team?
So I tend to uh, create as detailed a briefing as possible, and thanks to the advent of ChatGPT and the other LLMs, it's accelerated that process a lot for me. And the other thing is I use a project management tool where I follow my projects, but also the tasks that that are included in projects, or even other tasks that I need to keep track of, given the dynamic environment.
What project management tool do you guys use?
I use a
Motion.
motion, yeah,
I've
yeah.
never used Motion. What do you like about Motion versus like Asana or ClickUp if you have used those?
I've tried a lot of them over the years. What I like about motion is because it manages the calendar. So my calendar, it plugs into it. It will insert tasks that I have to do inside of the calendar. So it sort of fills my schedule automatically, rather than me having to go and look at the list all the time. And then it keeps a separate project with the list of tasks and the different assignees in it. separately. So I can kind of look at it differently from, project and task based, and that's what I enjoy about it. I mean, it has a bunch of keyboard shortcuts, so it's one of those things where it's a small change, but over the course of a week, it saves me a good amount of time. And we've in the past we've also used Monday.com internally, which is a lot of our choices are driven by simplicity and adoption rather than uh you know any kind of complicated abilities for people to be able to do any kind of product features. And so if I were working in a software company, I'd probably have I'd be singing a different tune. But I think given the nature of what we do, it's just, it's very dynamic. Marketing has to constantly be updating their messaging, and so that has an impact on other different aspects in the company. It's the conversations we have. The product offering is one of the you know core competencies of the company is having a constantly updated customer offering and value proposition. And so all of those things have to fluctuate, but they don't require any kind of technical complexity to manage. It's just that things need to get done, and we just have to make sure that balls don't get dropped.
I've definitely seen that in my experience with teams, like, coming in, and I've gone into teams that were 10% of the size of other companies that I've been at, but had 3 times more platforms that they were using,
Yeah.
or, complexity of software. I know, like, we originally had a sauna at one of these companies, and we needed more features, and so we moved over to ClickUp, and man, the time it took to get everybody really bought into why we were doing that, the cost of change was pretty significant just in terms of delays, kinda the resistance from team and getting them on board and then training them, and, then, like, you build one system in there that you think is the most effective, but then another team member ends up being like, "This is not actually the best way to do it," which is great, let's find better ways, and it's just this constant reiteration of reteaching people how to do things, because ClickUp is amazing and quite complex too, so
It's a little daunting. Yeah. I think it's a great product, but again, what's really hard to ascertain before implementation is the uh, overhead that it's going to take in terms of time and bandwidth, just to make sure that the system is set up and operating because it's not like you can set it up once and forget about it. All of these things tend to change and the company grows, or departments split, and because you're growing, the different functions have to go in different places. So yes, I think it's tough. And as in a related topic, I have done now 4 or 5 Salesforce implementations and sort of acted in all cases as the internal product manager. And the ones that have gone well always had a lot of buy-in uh, and a lot of willingness to adopt. Whereas the ones where people were very skeptical and I can probably take responsibility for not putting more effort in communicating and getting buy-in early, even if the decision makers who were around the table were the right ones, the users might not have been as uh, informed as they probably should have been. And so it's one of those things that you learn through experience, is that you can index for features and very nifty tools and what have you. But at the end of the day, is it really comes down to adoption and people getting value out of it, and that should be the the primary driver of anything of the sort that gets happening. Is any kind of change management should clearly and in practice provide that value and improve, call it productivity, but also well-being and satisfaction.
I think when you go into a company and you're new, or maybe it's even your first time as a COO, I know for me, there was this like, okay, what does that actually mean for me? And like now I guess I'm in charge of systems. And I'm actually not a systems person. but I'm really like my strength is putting team in place and then holding them accountable and giving them the freedom to go build the systems. But there was a time early on where, there's like 3, 4 of us, and I'm responsible for a lot more. And I found myself getting distracted. This is like one of those lessons, was getting distracted with like the pretty object or
Mhm.
the thing that sounded good on like, started getting ads for, I remember like one of them was this SOP platform that was like, you can put all your SOPs in here and all your team trainings, and the video was really compelling.
Yeah, I've been sort of the exact same ads.
Yeah, then I'm like, okay, this is great. Like we need to do this. And I went and like I spent probably a week, week and a half of my project time, like transferring all this stuff. And then I had the lesson of, well, now I got to convince the team to like start using this, the things that we were using. And man, we probably used that for like 2 to 3 weeks. And then I was like, this is actually creating way more problems than just our Google Sheets. And we ended up, I took that company. I was originally the recruiting manager. I was the second hire. Up to when I left, we had like 108 employees. That's when I was COO. And we were still using Google Sheets for all of our SOPs with zero problems.
Yeah.
It's just like funny looking back, thinking that I thought I needed some crazy platform. So it's something now that I really make sure when I go in to do fractional work, or I'm even just like supporting other people. It's like you sometimes think that you need something way more extravagant than you really do. And so I just want to double click on your point, the KISS, keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
It's just way better.
Yeah, and I think that, I can't remember who said this, but that the simplicity is, in itself, an art form, and it applies to business, not just to, designing a car or anything, is that, it's very tempting to want to delegate, um, bandwidth and workload to, a special software. But there is something a little perverse in the way I guess the idea is set up, because you end up actually creating more work, and uh, and it's part of the adoption process from the software company side, that they don't tell you that there is this overhead that's going to happen, because obviously on the sales side they'll say, oh, this is a solution to all your problems, this is what you've been looking for, but in truth, uh, I think especially at this scale of a business where we're 120 some employees, uh, that actually weighs pretty heavily. And whereas in a large corporation, well, you have a dedicated team who's responsible for vetting the software, uh, setting it up, and then it kind of gets disseminated across the organization, and those um that additional work and maintenance that is required won't be felt as much as it would be in a place that's smaller, and every contributor is uh represents a much higher percentage of the output than it does in those large companies.
There's also the importance of how this reflects and what it's teaching to your team. Also, it's like something that Cole, the owner of the company that I worked with, he always taught me you need to teach people how to think, not what to do. And so if you're keeping things really simple, you're teaching your team also simplicity. And one of the things that I learned from Jen Hootie, she did really good, who's actually one of Cameron's partners. I worked with her for 90 days. And there was things that I wanted to implement and change, and she was awesome. She let me just go in and really do whatever I wanted. And one of the most simple things that she did every single time where she said, "What is the clear problem that this is solving?" And it was interesting how many times, like, that would, like, sit me back and really be like, "Okay, what is the real problem here?" And then, like, when I would hear myself say it out loud, sometimes I was like, "Man, maybe we don't actually need this big change." And so that's something that even, like, asking your team when they're bringing you ideas and solutions, like, what is the clear problem that we're really trying to solve, and what's the cascading effect of actually implementing this? Which, speaking of problem, I would be really curious to hear, what is your approach to coaching team through burnout, stress, or even resistance to change?
Man, those are in my experience, those all sort of require different approaches, even if there are, parallels and some similarities. So, for example,
Burnout.
there it's really about, um, I think this is where the leader or the person who's in charge bears some responsibility because there are people who naturally will not know when to say no, and so it's important to monitor those people in particular to uh, make sure that they are prioritizing. And so, you know, we can have 100 ideas of things that would be amazing to try. And one of the strengths here internally is that we like to test a lot of things, especially on the marketing side and on the product development side. Um, but that comes at a cost. And so the big challenge is making sure that we stay, we don't derail anything from the core business and that the different team members are not getting pulled away from core or high value, high priority initiatives. And so I think one part to making sure that doesn't happen is, well, you know, are you managing your workload and just having that conversation and say, hey, are you prioritizing? Okay, show me what, sometimes they'll say, hey, I'll check this out. I'm working on this, and they'll when we meet, we'll do our one-on-one and check-ins. They'll tell me, hey, here are the 60 things that I'm working on, and if I feel like they're okay, it's like okay, great, have at it. However, what are the things that you absolutely need to do? And if you had to go on vacation next week, what are the ones that absolutely would have to get done, and which ones are the ones that you can push back? And then we internally we created a thing called the ice box, right? Which is just well, these are all these amazing ideas that we want to pursue at some point, and we don't want to forget about them, but we don't have the current capacity to do it. So let's just put it in there, and then it's just having that discipline to do that constantly. Now, in a business like a real estate brokerage, another source of burnout is just the nature of the beast. This is a very to begin with, a very relationship driven industry. So people tend uh, to hire the realtors that they know, or that they've been referred by somebody else, and the people skills are very important. And with that comes that particularly on the sales leadership side, that could be um, very demanding on the emotional dimension, because there is this aspect of having to manage uh, performance and emotional aspects rather than just outright performance. It's not just about hey, you didn't make your calls this week. It's also thinking about well, this sales leader has spoken to 20 people this week and they're constantly having to repeat the same things, and so they have to manage that motivation, and really they end up being in what one former boss of mine just told me not long ago is like, hey, you're in the attitude management business, and that can take a toll on particularly the sales leaders, more than even a list of tasks might, because it is demanding um, to be both sort of empathetic, but also holding them accountable at the same time, and it is a little tiring, and so that's kind of preventing that, and a lot of that solution will come from upstream solutions like hiring the right people, making sure that they're properly vetted, that they're properly trained, and so that uh, when you solve for that, a lot of that burnout tends to go away for that specific one thing. You asked me about two other things, right? It was change management, and what was the other one?
Stress and resistance. Yeah, which we kind of talked a little bit about the change management piece, but yeah, in terms of stress, this would be the one that almost feel like can come first before the burnout. I mean, this is my experience, and I was going through a bunch of health issues as well, and man, I was the person that would say yes to everything and learning boundaries. I mean, it was one of the things that Cole, when we ended up deciding that I was leaving the company, he's like, "I'm worried that if you don't go take time to heal yourself, like, you're gonna end up in the hospital or dead." And if, that's on me, like, my ability to really I was working like 70, 80 hours a week, and I maybe in 2.5 years, I took 1 vacation, and it was supposed to be 11 days, and I cut it by, like, 7 days. I only went to Hawaii for 4 because I just was like, "I can't leave." And so there's been a lot that I've had to learn, but the stress kinda came first for me. That's why I kept saying yes, and my inability to, like, know how to work around that, and then the burnout really came and the health issues. So what would you do in terms of your team coming to you really stressed?
I think it comes back to, one of the key benefits of having something like EOS is that it forces the leadership team, and particularly the CEO and COO, to narrow down what the focus is going to be for 3 months at a time. And so for example, when we use the rocks, uh, the guidelines tell you not to use more than, approximately 3 for a quarter for, a specific leader. And so the key thing, is to really make sure you identify those rocks, like those key initiatives that are outside of the day to day, that those are really the ones that they have to be focused on, so that as other things come up, um, they can keep in mind what's important and what what isn't, and learning to say no. I mean, it's the I learned the exact same lesson you learned. I I can't say I had great boundaries, early on in my career, and it's a skill that has to be learned. But at the same time, uh, there's a silver lining to being that way, and it's that one takes on a lot of challenges. That one, if one had a lot of boundaries and then was very rigid, uh, would probably not take on, and so it's learning to transition from being this ambitious do everything person to being a little more strategic, in not in the business strategy sense, but strategic in how focus is allocated, and then trying to teach that to other leaders so they understand, hey, yes, you've been asked to do those 10 things, but those 3 things that you have uh, on your scoreboard are actually the ones that are most important. And so if those don't happen, hey, we'll do it later. It doesn't matter. And then just try to do that. Now, I granted in different businesses, so if you're a startup, that's probably not a realistic approach, because priorities will change, weekly or biweekly, and but they also operate of a different operating system. So it'll be, we have sprints and we have different things that run on a 2 week schedule, uh, and so I think the other thing is also to make sure that um, the right people are in the right company. Someone who wants to operate in in that kind of constantly changing company might not fit so well in a place that is either more established or requires a little more rigidity. And then there's everything in between. And so that's the other thing, is that the stress. Uh, I think people don't outright say it, but sometimes comes from people not being in the either the right seat or on the right bus to begin with.
Yeah, that's a great point. And going back to kind of the top 3 things too, when I think back to where I was at, I was leading 5 departments, and each of those departments had their own kinda key rocks that they needed to focus on. And then for me, my top things, we weren't even using EOS at the time. We didn't really have, like, key rocks. We were just like, "What are all the things that we wanna get done this quarter?" And sometimes there's 2 big things, and sometimes there'd be 10. But my biggest learning lesson was kinda like you said, teaching teaching people how to do the things that you're wanting them to do, to take things off your plate. And my, like, number one lesson through all of that was hiring people with experience at certain stages is so important, because in the early days, we didn't have as many resources, so I was bringing on people for 3K, 4K a month who were just out of college, had no experience that I'm pouring into and teaching, and that worked up until a certain stage. And then I have 5 departments under me, and I'm trying to move all of these people up at the same rate of growth that I had, and it just wasn't possible.
Correct.
And then then it was like, now I'm way too deep in a hole where I'm responsible for all these things. I can't trust certain people with certain decisions, so I was still in the weeds. And if I would have hired probably 6 to 8 months before I had this, like, epiphany moment, hired people with experience that already had been managers, already had led teams, already knew about recruiting, it would have saved so much pain for me and everybody else. So, yeah, I'm just
Oh, it's a huge lesson. I mean, it's
I
amazing
love
that
that.
it's I think a lot of people don't necessarily learn that, and Chris and I have had this exact conversation over the course of the last year, because as the company grows, the there is a someone who was a kind of a leadership coach for the company in the past, and she told us there's a difference between emerging talent and proven talent, and so those are the kind of labels that she uh, assigned to that exact point that you're making, and it's that yes, it's great when the company is young, fresh, and it's great because in your case you got the opportunity to to climb the ranks really quickly, but as the company scales, um, the thought process behind hiring the right people has to change, and the stakes become higher and higher, and so that's why you have to pay a lot more for the talent and the proven skill, to reduce your risk as a business because now you have a lot more to lose. Whereas at the beginning, the risk might be smaller and you can iterate through the problem. But and especially I can give you the exact example for our company. As we build new markets, the keystone is the sales leader and the one that is specific to that market. And that hire is very important because not only do they take on the responsibility for performance of that market, but making the wrong choice also leads to attrition on the agent side and and in uh, and that leads to losing clients, but also um, building it back up becomes very difficult because now all of those agents who were there under that leader were either selected by the leader or were operating throughout their tenure and are now, tainted in a way. And it's got nothing to do with the fact of that person might who was the sales leader might not have been a bad player. They just didn't fit that specific role in that specific company, and so it really requires a mind shift as what the company scales. When you go from 0 to 10 to 20, $30 million in revenue, you're not thinking about talent the same way. And of course, the opportunities for people internally also will evolve, right? In the sense that you can aspire to climb the ranks very quickly in a company that's fresh and where your 80 hours a week are going to generate a big amount of output. But as the company grows, your contribution relative to the overall output of the company shrinks. And so, there are trade-offs there where it's beneficial because now there isn't so much stress put on one single person, but y- your impact is not as highly felt as it would be if the company remained small. And so to say that is that what you're looking for is as you're scaling is that you're paying more for this talent, but this talent is used to operating in that context.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you so much for all of your insight today. I always love to kind of wrap up with asking, what is your in the next 6 months, what are you most excited about?
As we're testing a new strategy for expansion, and so we're actually sort of building it as a test for expansion and selecting new expansion markets. And I'm really looking forward to rolling that out and seeing where the science meets the art in terms of selecting those markets and which ones are going to pan out.
Awesome. Super exciting. If anyone wants to reach out to you, where would they do that?
You can just look me up on LinkedIn.
Okay, perfect. Well, Aldo, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks for having me.